Listening to that, Ben Wallace, former Conservative Defence Secretary. Good morning.
Good morning.
I realise that asking any questions about the White House's position, it's a very unpredictable path that they take when it comes to these things. But do you think that President Trump is prepared to fully walk away from broking the ceasefire, or do you think it's another step on the road to the deal?
No, I think he's prepared to walk away. I think he's prepared to walk away because he's not actually very good at doing deals. And I think he will want to shift on from the focus that he promised to finish this in 24 hours. And that at the moment, it looks like he's being spectacularly unsuccessful. So I think he'll want to sort of change the subject, go and focus on China, and sort of say a plague on all your houses. I'm the great deal maker. If I'd been in power, it would have been just fantastic at the time, and we never would have had this. And I think that's what he's really partly laying the groundwork for. And I think he's also learning the lesson that a number of us warned at the beginning of this process, is that at the moment the US isn't offering any skin in the game. And if you can't offer anything to Ukraine, you only seem to be wanting to extract their minerals under sort of almost duress. It's quite hard to motivate people to come to a deal or a compromise from the Western or European side. And I think if he wants to genuinely help solve this and come to a ceasefire, the US has to be prepared to lead by putting assets or skin in the game. And if it doesn't, it just becomes effectively a bystander that at the moment, or a cheerleader that many in Europe are starting to think of, a cheerleader for Russia. I mean, I saw after that horrendous attack on people in Sumy last week, almost first, on the media waves, was Donald Trump saying the Russians think this is a mistake. I mean, I don't know what people think of that. I certainly know what people in the US intelligence and security community think of that. They're horrified, and I think that's what we're probably seeing, is a US laying the groundwork for saying, well, I tried. In the same way, obviously, let's not forget, your listeners, he tried with North Korea. Remember Rocket Man? He went to visit him, and subsequently after that visit, North Korea increased its nuclear weapons. He tried with the Taliban. That was spectacularly unsuccessful, and he's trying to now blame Biden, but it was in fact his deal and his conditions of the deal that actually led to Taliban victory. So I think what he's doing is, when he's up against someone like Zelensky and the countrymen and women of Ukraine fighting for survival, he finds it harder.
If he does then leave the room, what chance of a ceasefire agreement? Because we heard Sergei Markov saying there that a European peacekeeping or security assurance force wouldn't be acceptable to the Kremlin. The changed factor here really was the presence of Donald Trump in the White House. So how to reach a ceasefire if he said, I'm not going to play?
Well, I think it's going to be very hard anyhow, because as soon as Donald Trump went to the White House, he actually gave Russia hope. If you remember early on, he basically set out a whole range of details, or his administration did, that was everything that Russia wanted and nothing that Ukraine or Europe wanted. So he gave suddenly the Russians, who were on track to have lost 1 million men, deserted, killed or injured, he suddenly gave them hope that they might actually be able to win or get everything they want. And I think, listening to Sergei Markov, delusional is an understatement. This is Russia still thinking it can dictate to people and other countries, other sovereign countries, which, by the way, in that very sentence, it breaks its traditional and original undertaking in places like the Budapest Memorandum, where it said it would respect the sovereignty of other nations to seek partnerships, including security partnerships.
But can Europe do this without the US? I'm talking about continued fighting in Ukraine. It needs that military support. It just seems that without the US presence, Europe cannot give Ukraine the backing it needs to win this war.
Well, I've said before on this programme, Europe can if it wants to. We are a sizable bloc of economies, some of the richest countries on earth. If Europe wants to do something about this and solve it, it can step up further. I listened to a very good speech by the Prime Minister Keir Starmer at Lancaster House a few weeks ago, as he decided to say he was going to stake a stand and we were going to have the coalition of the willing. But then that was followed by not being willing to fund our defence properly. So, Europe can. Germany is going to 3% of GDP by 2028, 3.5% of GDP by 2030. Poland, Sweden has said it's going to 3% of GDP, and we're still faffing around spinning lines from number 10. And if Europe wants to do this, it can. And the other thing that I think people should recognise in the media. It's not as essential as it was America's support. At the beginning, it was very, very important. But a lot of these weapon systems are being replaced by either Ukrainian initiatives. It was, let's not forget, a Ukrainian missile that actually sank the Russian flagship.
But the tide isn't turning, is it? It's not turning in Ukraine's favour. It simply isn't.
Well, it's not turning in Russia's favour either. Russia are losing considerable numbers of people. 20,000 armoured vehicles they've lost, including about 5,000 tanks. You know, look, this is a war, and it is horrible, and no one thinks they want people to carry on dying needlessly. But Ukrainians are fighting for survival. You heard in the Russian MP's comments there that they will carry on believing they can tell Ukraine what to do. And Ukraine, quite rightly, have a trust deficit with Russia. Russia has broken, I think it's over 100 international agreements. In recent times, it's broken its agreements in Georgia, it's broken the Budapest Memorandum, it invaded Crimea 2014 and then said there was nothing going to happen after that. And then they did a full-scale invasion of the rest of Ukraine. Would I trust that if I was Ukrainian, or if I was one of the 18,000 widows or mothers of the people that have been killed between 2014 and the actual invasion in Ukraine? I don't think I'd trust Putin at all. And Donald Trump is seeing that himself. You know, he talks about ceasefire. Ukraine says it's willing to consider one, and Russia carries on bombing indiscriminately Ukraine. As you rightly said in your interview with Mr. Markov, Russia doesn't seem to have stopped at all. It seems to have carried on. So, look, the thing that will deter Putin more than anything is a strong international, certainly European and Western stance that we will not let him dictate terms, and that he needs to recognise that in the end his economy is tanking, his military is suffering horrendously, he's having to now rely on North Korean troops, poor souls who don't even really know where they are, and he thinks that's some great game. The reality is
I don't want to interrupt, sorry, I do want to ask you one more question, and time is against us, because I note on the front of the FT this morning there's a suggestion that the Defence Review will look to an Arctic build-up, expanding the UK's military footprint in the Arctic and High North, which is something I imagine you would welcome, because that was something you raised in your time as Defence Secretary.
Yeah, but we don't have the funding to expand. That's the simple reality. You know, we're on 2.3% of GDP. When I took over, it was the first real increase, and actually the biggest increase since the Cold War, despite the spin of Number 10, £24 billion extra. We're not big enough to do all these things. Either Number 10 needs to get the checkbook out, tell Rachel Reeves to cut some other budgets and fund
it's
it, and
announced
then
a
we can
big
do those
increase
things.
in defence spending.
What, 0.2% of GDP 2 years earlier than planned, compared to the rest of Europe spending 3% of GDP, 4%, Poland 5%.
Well, it's something, isn't it? What I'm saying is it's a move in the right direction. They have moved.
It won't touch
the
the
suggestion
size.
is they're moving in the direction that you advocated when you were in that job.
But when I advocated it, I got an extra £24 billion, and I was prepared to cut other capabilities. It'll be interesting to see if they cut other capabilities. It's definitely the right theatre to be focusing on, and I don't disagree with that. But fundamentally, we need to make sure that our armed forces are properly funded, properly stocked, our soldiers are properly equipped, and that whatever our ambitions, and look, if Number 10 want to come out and say we'd just like to be small or you know, medium without any leadership, that's fine, just do that. But stop pretending we are a global military force and not fund it properly. And let's put it in perspective. When we last built Trident submarines, we were spending over 4% of GDP on a defence, between 3.8 and 4.2. We are still trying to roll out 4 new Trident submarines when we're only spending 2.3%. Any increase from 2.3 to 2.5 will predominantly go on the nuclear deterrent and a few other things, but we will not be making a sizable change, as they will probably say in their spin.
Okay, well, we'll see it when it comes out. Ben Wallace, thank you, former Conservative Defence Secretary. That was the suggestion from the FT this morning. The government said it would publish that report first half of 2025, so it should be reasonably imminent now.
26 minutes past 8, let's go a little earlier than usual.